for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think. Jamil and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters. Here we are, another episode of Brew Strong.
Good morning, everybody.
It is morning, which is unusual because, usually we're not quite sober by this time.
Right, yeah, I'm usually just kind of coming off.
The previous night.
Yeah, but today we're climbing on early.
Yeah, we're... Justin's like, hey, what would you like to drink? Yeah, I got coffee, I got some cranberry juice, I got, beer.
Yeah, please.
It's like, okay, we know where you guys roll. Yeah, we're not out of hand, but a little bit of a lubrication for the show never hurts.
That's right. You refresh ourselves with a smell of hops in the morning, and puts us proper frame of mind.
Little Racer 5 this morning going
Excellent.
On down.
Yes,
quite nice hoppy IPA from Bear Republic.
Yeah, I love their beers.
Good stuff. And we're here live in Pacheco, in the fine studios in Pacheco.
Mm-hmm. On a relatively sunny morning today, as opposed to previous.
Yeah, and studio temperature is fine.
Mm-hmm. Not
sweaty, not cold. Just great. So we are live, and this show is always done live. And you can join in the chat room, and you can listen live and chat with other listeners as far as the show and other interests, and ask questions that we'll answer at the end of the show. Yeah, even the hard ones. And to get to that, you go to thebrewingnetwork.com. There's a button for chat and join in the chat, and a button for listen live. And there's even a button to go to the store.
That's right.
In the store right now, you're going to find a few quality items. One is Brewing Classic Styles. That's the book that John and I wrote.
Signed by both of us.
Signed by both of us. Also, your excellent book, How to Brew, which that you've signed those, and those are signed in the store, the place you can buy them.
That's right. Signed
by the author, and that's a great book. That's one.
I always feel like there's really not a whole lot of value added to my signature in the book, but. I should get like a multicolored stamp or something to jazz it up. But they're signed anyway, so if you like that sort of thing.
Well, now the book's not new anymore. I've signed it. It's like it'll have to sell at the discount table. Yeah. And even better, I like the books, but I'm really excited about the new Brew Strong shirts.
Yeah, those are sweet.
If you're listening live, take a moment, click on that, check out the new Brew Strong shirts. Great logo, great artwork Justin's had done. They're in gray and in red, so you actually have options.
Those are nice. That's nice, yeah.
Those are some sweet-looking shirts, and people have already ordered them, so they're going to go fast again. I don't know how many Justin ordered, but it always seems never quite enough. So if you want one, jump on it real quick and get them, because they'll go. You'll be going, I couldn't get that.
Jamil, I was just thinking that maybe to add a little more value to the Brewing Classic Styles or How to Brew books, maybe if you or I actually
put some bodily fluids in it.
Well, actually spilled some beer on a couple pages. Given that, like we actually used that copy.
Hey, that's a good way to get rid of all the damaged books. Yeah. Say, that was on purpose. No. Yeah. Signing books, you never know what accidents will occur, and no damaged books.
Okay.
Yeah, we always take care of those. Well, today we are talking about hot side aeration.
That's right, hot side aeration. Oxidation processes in beer,
flavor stability.
Yep,
and how, especially hot side aeration, how that impacts flavor stability, and that's one of the things that. I think a lot of people, when they go all grain brewers, when they switch from extract with steeping grains, one of the things you're always told is, don't stir your mash too much. Oh, be careful when you're sparging, all this stuff. Oh, you're gonna add air to it. It's gonna oxidize. It's gonna ruin your beer.
Oh my God!
It's gonna your beer's gonna stale faster. Things like that. Pumps. People just totally freaking out. And I've always been of the opinion, well, I'm a little bit cautious, but I don't really care. It's going to be okay. Just don't go wild. Don't whip out the egg beater and froth it up and things like that. It's going to work out all right.
Yeah.
So
a lot of questions, especially when you get into, I guess when you start talking to professional brewers and all the care they seem to take with every step of the process, and you read the journals and you see whole articles on lipoxygenase and oxygen and enzymes that add oxygen to the beer and can staling reactions that could occur downstream and so on. And I guess it really raises the question for a lot of brewers, how significant is this? Is it something that we have to be aware of, or is it one of those little esoteric things that goes on in the background, but kind of like I don't know, some other natural phenomena like rainstorms in the Himalayas or a butterfly flapping in the Himalayas that really doesn't affect us. And so I think that's where today's show, we're really going to help nail down some of those things and give everybody a better idea of what's really important when it comes to hot side aeration and oxidation and flavor stability.
Can you give us a brief definition of what hot side aeration is?
Well, hot side aeration is kind of considered to be mash processes that occur before the wort is chilled to go in the fermenter. So things that occur, say, during the mashing and lautering processes, and any transfers that you're doing of the beer at a time, people are concerned about it in terms of rims and Herm system when they're pumping wort around, recirculating wort through the vessels. It's like, it looks like I've got an air leak in one line, and there's air bubbling in. And in my book, I took great pains years ago when I wrote it to say, don't aerate when you're stirring your mash. Don't froth it. And
see, that's where people got that all nonsense idea of worrying about that.
Well, I'm reading and it says that this happens. Right, so, right. But the fact that it happens doesn't mean that it's terribly important.
So basically, anything from when you're doughing in for your all grain brewers, when you're adding that grain to your water your grain for the mash, to when you're before you get to the boil point.
Right.
Anything in between there, that's hot side aeration.
That's right. And if you're an extract brewer and trying to dissolve dry malt extract into water and it's clumping and you're taking a whisk to break it up and get that stuff to declump and dissolve in, you're thinking, oh no, I've just added air to my hot wort. I think that was bad.
So the question's always been, and people use like Budweiser. Oh well, they have this sheet thing with the hot wort and all this,
hot air
right?
Through
And they
it,
bubble air through it, and all this stuff. Being an issue as far as hot side aeration. So it's been an ongoing argument amongst the internet and homebrew community, and even the craft brewer,
right?
That this is an issue or isn't an issue. People have problems. People experience problems. People don't. So what we've done is you talked to one of the foremost brewing scientists in the world.
Yep, I talked to a guy I've known casually for several years, Dr. Charlie Bamforth. He is a professor at UCSD, and he is one of the few brewing scientists that have really studied all aspects of oxidation and all through the process. So he's was kind enough to join us and help walk us through all these different topics.
All right, what we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we've got a great interview that John did with Charlie Bamforth, and I think it really explains a lot and puts a lot of these questions to rest. And we'll find out more about hot side aeration, all the scientific stuff about it that you guys can geek out over, and we'll be back
in a minute
after this.
This is Brew Strong.
Hey, Push, the new brewery's looking good.
Thanks, Finn. Piece by piece.
Well, let's fire her up. Whoa! Is that a new kettle?
Yeah, just got it brand new, but paid half price.
What? And that blade scale?
40% off.
The new tap handle?
$5 instead of $13. Got a new regulator for the brew stand, too, but $5 instead of $25.
Dude, where are you stealing all this stuff from?
Where else? The More Beer deal of the day.
Announcing the Beer, and More Beer deal of the day. Every day, a new fantastic deal from big items to small that will blow you away. Boil kettles, carboy carriers, sterile siphon starters, digital timers. Watch morebeer.com every day for a new deal, and you just might find the item you've been waiting for at a price you cannot believe. Hurry, because stock is limited on most items.
And that sweet Guinness cap? Let me guess.
The More Beer deal of the day.
Yeah, I knew it. Come on, let's brew something. Find the More Beer deal of the day at morebeer.com. Celebrity voices impersonated.
What have you gotten out of a vial of White Labs yeast?
WLP 001, Cal Ale, baby.
23, Burton Ale.
008, East Coast Ale.
Cal Common, WLP 810.
It's gonna be WLP 400 with beer.
I got a sweet hoodie for my vial.
Huh?
White Labs, your source for great brewer's yeast, would like to invite all homebrewers to join the White Labs Customer Club. Redeem your empty vials for great White Labs merchandise and products. Free yeast, glassware, t-shirts, baseball caps, sweatshirts, polo shirts, and you won't believe what you'll get for 5,000 vials. Members also receive a newsletter packed with White Labs updates and facts, interviews with professional brewers, brew your own clone recipes, beercook.com recipes, and customer club stories. The White Labs Customer Club. Save your vials and get in the club. White Labs. It's all in the vial.
Live. Beer Radio. The Brewing Network.
The Brewcasters.
If you're just starting, don't be discouraged by all this stuff. It's so easy.
Just throw it together.
Put some sugar and some water and some yeast in there.
Yeah.
Brewing Network. Like the Lance Armstrong of the beer world. Except for that nut thing. This is Brew Strong.
We're back. We're talking hot side aeration, flavor stability,
Oxidation.
John has done an interview with Charlie Bamforth. Now, tell us about Charlie.
Well, yeah, we've got a real special show today.
Talking to the microphone, that helps.
That would help. Yeah. Dr. Charlie Bamforth. He's one of the foremost brewing scientists in the world, and he is the chair of the Food Science and Technology Department at UC Davis.
I went to UC Davis.
Oh, you did?
My alma mater.
Well, did you take any brewing classes?
No. Well, a lot of organic chemistry and
that's good.
Chemistry and all my undergraduate work was OChem major.
I never took any organic. I wish I had. But anyway,
believe me, you don't wish. Well, maybe you do.
Yeah. But it would help me, when I talk to these actually very learned people like Dr. Bamforth. But
you don't consider me learned?
Oh yeah, you too.
Thanks.
I include you and Justin in the same breath.
That's like damning with faint praise.
I excel at that.
You put me in a class that that's fine for Justin, but for me, you're just like throwing me under the bus there.
It's a long bus, trust me.
Thanks.
But anyway, yeah, did you know that UC Davis is the only accredited 4-year brewing school in the U.S., and Dr. Bamforth is a fellow of the Institute of Brewing and the fellow of the Institute of Biology. He's the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the American Society of Brewing Chemists and a member of the editorial board of the Journal of the Institute of Brewing and Technical Quarterly Journal of the Master Brewers Association of the Americas.
So he knows his shit.
He does. He's the author of hundreds of papers and several books on brewing.
He's highly respected.
And a particular passion of his is oxidation and flavor stability, which made him an ideal person to have on this particular show.
Great.
So I think everyone will really enjoy this. I know I learned a lot.
Hit it.
Welcome. Thanks very much. Nice to be here.
Dr. Bamforth, you've been, or I'll call you Charlie.
Call me Charlie, won't you? It's so much easier.
Yeah. So throughout your brewing career, you've tackled a number of different topics. I mean, you've published on pH and enzymes and foam, and but done quite a bit with oxidation, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah, we cover a fairly wide area, you know. And my current area is health and why beer is good for you in moderation and so on. But yeah, we've addressed a whole bunch of different stuff. But oxidation and staling, I often say, you know, it's the biggest technical challenge still facing brewers, whether they are small brewers or big companies. You know, trying to control the flavor stability of beer is the biggest technical challenge that remains, really. And I think it'll keep people gainfully employed doing the research for a good number of years, yeah.
Probably will. I know there's certainly a lot of different aspects to investigate.
Yeah, it's tremendously complicated, you know, because so many of the things that the things that contribute to flavor are present at such low levels. And you really only get a change in the level of a few of them, even just one of them, that you can detect at such very low levels that basically is flavor instability. You know, assuming that what you're looking for is stability, and you're looking for consistency. So it's not like, you know, haze, where you know the things that make beer go hazy are present in fairly sizable quantities. You know, with flavor stability, the changes can be at tiny levels of some of these substances.
Parts per billion and so on. Yeah.
Parts per billion, or, you know, in one or two instances parts per trillion, but certainly the parts per billion level, you know. So it really, it ain't easy. And not only that, you know, with something like haze, there's a relatively small number of things that make beer go hazy, you know, proteins and polyphenols and carbohydrates and so on. But with flavor, there are so many different compounds that contribute to flavor that it's much more complicated. And when you're trying to control one of them, you know, it doesn't necessarily make it the same way in which you control all of them. So it just makes the thing so very complicated. So what we've been trying to do over the years, us and others as well, is to find sort of generic solutions, ways of controlling all of these things. So fairly general approaches, rather than trying to pick them off one at a time, to try to go for the generic solutions to this terrible problem.
Well, I understand from reading some of your papers that there are lots of different compounds you can measure that appear as a sign of staleness in beer or instability. Are there a few that are, I guess, the leading candidates that define stale beer character?
Well, you know, a lot of people would say one in particular, and most work has concentrated on it. It's called noninal, or trans-2-noninal, or the chemists these days call it E2-noninal, and that's the one that you see in most papers. But
that's the cardboard one, right?
Yeah, that's the cardboard one. That really is too simplistic, because, you know, I can open a bottle of noninal, and yeah, I smell cardboard. But I can taste stale beer that doesn't have very particularly high levels of E2-noninal in it, and I can taste other beers that got quite significant levels of noninal in it, and they don't taste particularly stale. So it's oversimplistic to talk just about noninal. Noninal is a carbonyl compound. You know, it's got this carbon linked to oxygen with a double bond, and you get that carbonyl group in many different compounds in beer. I had a guy working with me once, Mike Walters, back in England years ago. He's an Aussie himself, and he looked at the carbonyl compounds in beer, and there's lots of them, you know, tens, hundreds of these different carbonyl compounds, and some of them are going to be important and some probably less important. And, you know, with different beers, you know, what's important in one beer may not necessarily be the same in another beer, just to add to all this terrible complexity. So just to focus in on anything that makes noni now is simplistic. If I was going to draw a generalization, I would say, well, a lot of the compounds that you get in aged beer, they tend to be these carbonyl compounds. Contributing not only to cardboard, but some of the other age characters as well. Metallic flavor in beer, it can be due to things like traces of iron, but also due to a certain carbonyl compound, and some of these other age characters as well due to carbonyls.
Okay. What sort of compounds comprise carbonyls, or is it the other way around? I guess there are melanoidin-derived compounds that are considered these carbonyls.
Well, they can come from all sorts of different sources. The one that most people, again, the literature is focused on, would be the oxidation of unsaturated fatty acids, and that is the route. If you oxidize and break down linoleic acid, then yes, you do come to E2-noninal. And so a lot of people say, well, that's it, that's the thing we should focus on, the oxidation of unsaturated fatty acids. But, other compounds can break down to give carbonyls. Above all, alcohols. I mean, you think of what's the immediate precursor of ethyl alcohol, ethanol alcohol in beer, and it's acetaldehyde, and it works the other way around as well, and that's a carbonyl compound. Acetaldehyde is a carbonyl compound.
Okay.
And so you can get the degradation of higher alcohols to give carbonyl compounds. There's a guy 40 years ago, a guy called Hashimoto working with Kirin in Japan, and he worked on this oxidation of higher alcohols, and he actually showed that it was catalyzed, it was speeded up by melanoidins, the colored compounds from the Maillard reaction. Now, a lot of people say, well, these compounds are antioxidants, and he showed that they actually catalyzed and promoted the oxidation of higher alcohols to produce carbonyls, and so that just it's typical of the complexity that we've got around here. Amino acids in from the wort and either survive into the beer, they can break down in something called the Strecker reaction to give carbonyls called Strecker aldehydes and so on. And then you can get other you can get one aldehyde reacting with another one carbonyl compound reacting with another one in something called an aldol condensation to make an even more complicated one, such as E2-noninal. So all of these things are going on, and I haven't even mentioned the breakdown of the bitter acids, the iso-alpha acids. If you store beer and you measure the level of bitterness, the BU in a beer, it goes down with time. And what's happening is the iso-alpha acids are breaking down to give some carbonyl compounds as well. So all this is going on. So just to talk about oxidation of unsaturated fatty acids is far too simple. It's all happening.
Now, I guess chemically, it's also is it accurate to say that I guess oxygen in and of itself is not necessarily part of the process? It can be a pre-oxidized or a melanoidin catalyzing an oxidation type reaction and to produce staling compounds, and which you said there's many.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of flavor change, then it's much more complicated than just reactions that involve oxygen. But clearly, the oxidation state of the brew is important. When you talk about oxidation, you're not necessarily just simply talking about the level of oxygen. You're talking about the relative degree of oxidation and reduction of your system. So over the years, people have talked about redox, and they've talked about if you've got an oxidizing environment or an oxidized system, then that sort of oxidizing power can be transferred. So, for example, you could take a polyphenol and oxidize it, and you produce an oxidized polyphenol. So the oxygen has disappeared, but now you've got an oxidized polyphenol. What does that do? It either drops out of solution, or maybe it could conceivably pass on the oxidizing power to something else. The proteins, the thiol proteins, the gel proteins in the grain, they can be oxidized and become oxidized. And so you've got all these different redox reactions taking place. So it's strictly speaking, it's more accurate to talk about the amount of the redox potential, if you like, the amount of oxidation that's taking place. Clearly, oxygen itself can have an impact, but it tends to pass on the oxidizing potential to something else. The other thing I often talk about is the fact that oxygen itself, O2, the stuff we breathe, isn't of itself desperately reactive. I'm sitting here, you're sitting there in 20% oxygen, and it was so damn reactive, we'd have gone stale before the end of this interview, and that's not happening. And that's because oxygen itself is not desperately reactive, and you've got to activate it first. And you can activate it in various ways, and one is by enzymes, and the other way is by making it into these active forms of oxygen, these so-called radicals. And again, this is where the metal ions, things like iron and copper, come in, because they promote this formation of radicals, and these are the things that are really causing the damage.
Generating, I guess you call them hydroxyls and peroxides, right?
Yeah, the first one is superoxide, which I think is a great name, superoxide with a big S on its chest, and then peroxide, and then hydroxyl, which is the most reactive radical that's ever been identified. It's the most reactive chemical thing ever identified. It'll react with, first thing it comes into contact with, it'll attack it. And it's these radicals that whether it's in the finished beer or earlier on in the process, that are going to be causing many of the problems.
I see. Okay. Well, I guess I should bring it back to our homebrewing topic and preface this a little bit by saying that we've, as amateur brewers, we've come to understand the detriment of oxygen in the package. When we're bottling, we tell people not to aerate the beer at that point when they're transferring it to a bottle. Cap on foam to reduce the amount of oxygen in the package. But one area of controversy is how important is preventing oxidation of the hot wort before it's chilled. When it's in the mash, when it's being transferred to the boiler, when it's being transferred from the boiler to the chiller, and then into the fermenter. What stages should we be, aware of the potential for oxidation or the oxidation of some of the amino acids and proteins that you mentioned that can later catalyze other reactions?
Yeah, and the answer is who knows. And this is where so much of the research is going on, and so where so much of the controversy is, and so much of the debate. And it's a really confused scenario. One of the problems you see, John, is that it's a long way from malt to beer. There's a lot of stages go on in between, and you look at experiments that people have done, say in the brew house, looking at cutting down the amount of oxidation, how much oxygen creeps in. And then you go right the way down and look at how they've evaluated that, and they've tasted the beer right the way down. All these other processes that are perhaps not so well controlled have all taken place. And then they taste the beer, and they don't tell you exactly how they taste it. And they report, well, on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is fresh and 5 is stale, they do these precautions, and they cut down the amount of air creeping into the system. And before the precautions, it was 3.6, and then afterwards it was 3.1, and you go, whoop-de-doo, that's not dramatic. And so you've got to really look critically at the way people have done this work and done these experiments, reported them. And when you look critically at it, the evidence isn't desperately good. Intuitively, you can you can make some surmises, and you can observe individually what goes on in these various stages. Whether, in fact, it has materially has a major impact on flavor stability in the finished product is often debatable. But people have pushed it further and further back. You see, I don't think there's anybody who would argue that what you need to do is to keep the oxygen level in the finished product as low as possible. Everybody agrees with that. The lower the oxygen level in the bottle, the better. Everybody agrees totally with that.
Okay.
But the beer still goes stale, even when the oxygen level is comparatively low. Down at the part per billion level almost. It still goes stale. So they say, well, there's something else. And so they go back, and they've gone back, and of course, what the brewers always do, they go back and they blame the maltster. And it's reached that stage now. So they're talking about this enzyme like oxygenase in the malt, which is sort of predisposing the malt to give stale beer. Now, if that's true, there's very little hope. And the hope that people have got these days is they're using barleys that have been bred not to have this enzyme.
Okay.
And they're saying,
like the clarity barley.
Yeah, it's the equivalent thing, only this one, it has not got this enzyme like oxygenase. And they say, well, it gives fresher beer. Well, the evidence that I've looked at, it's not dramatic. Yeah.
And a couple months later, it's still stale, huh?
Yeah, it's still stale. And why is it still stale? Because there are other compounds that come from other reactions that are causing a problem. You see, if you conquered lipoxygenase and you say, it's just not working, then you still got the amino acid breakdown and the higher alcohol breakdown and the isoalpha acid breakdown and so on. And nobody in their right minds would say, well, okay, we'll sort out isoalpha acid breakdown. We'll just not put bitterness into the product. That would be very silly. Or let's see if we can do away with amino acids. The yeast ain't going to like that. And so, but there's all these other reactions taking place, and that's why it's naive to think, well, you can control lipid oxidation, the oxidation of unsaturated fatty acids. It's naive to think that will give you perfectly fresh beer. It won't. It's only one step, and that's why you've got to have generic solutions. So
I see.
It's absolutely true. There is an enzyme present in malt called lipoxygenase, and it will oxidize unsaturated fatty acids. No question, it does. And can that happen in a mash? Yes, of course it can. The more oxygen you've got available to it, then the greater is the chance that it will happen. But the enzyme is sensitive to heat, and that's why people who propose the importance of lipoxygenase, they say that it's advantageous to mash in at the highest possible temperature you can. To prevent this enzyme from working. That's why they talk about well-modified malts and infusion mashes coming in at, forgive me, I still always talk in terms of Celsius, but 65 degrees Celsius, so what's that, 149 Fahrenheit.
Right.
So that cuts down the risk of this enzyme working, and sure, if you minimize the amount of oxygen there, then clearly that will also help. But even if you eliminate this enzyme, the oxygen can still react with unsaturated fatty acids non-enzymically, particularly if you've got copper around the place. You've got a copper brew house, well, there you go. And traces of iron and so on. So that can still happen as well. But, if you cut down the amount of oxygen, that will cut down either of those routes to oxidize unsaturated fatty acids. But, the oxygen can react with other things as well. And we now know that oxygen reacts with these gel proteins to cross-link them, and that causes the sort of the sticky gel formation, the tide,
the top dough, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
And that's an oxidation phenomenon. And when that happens, what you produce is the traces of hydrogen peroxide, which is a very active form of oxygen. But there are enzymes present in the malt called peroxidases, and they take that hydrogen peroxide very quickly, and these enzymes are very tolerant of heat, heat stable, and they react this peroxide with polyphenols, and so you oxidize the polyphenols, and in turn they stick onto proteins and give you more cloudy wort. And so all of that's going on as well. They're also giving you an increased color. So there's no question that if you get oxidin in your mash, you run the risk of building up color, which is a problem if you've got very pale. If you're after very pale worts for a very gently colored lager or something, you've got this increased turbidity, which is actually good news for downstream hay stability because you're taking out proteins and polyphenols there. But you've also got these not terribly well defined flavor changes taking place. You've got to look experientially at what you see. Years ago, I was a quality manager in one of the Bass breweries in the UK, the brewery near Liverpool. And I'm segueing, I'm digressing slightly.
That's all right.
But, we brewed Carling Black Label, and Carling, I think it still is, but certainly at the time it was the biggest selling brand of beer in the UK, and we brewed it in 6 or 7 different breweries. And ours was the beer that everybody said, which is the Runcorn beer, in these blind tastings, and they could identify it every time, and it's because it was harsh and grainy. And they said to me that the quality manager and the head brewer Neil Talbot, you got to clean it up. So we actually did clean it up, and what we did was we cut down the amount of oxidation in the brew house. It wasn't influencing flavor stability, but it was influencing this grainy, harsh character. We did various things. And cleaned it up. And headquarters said, that's marvelous. We now got a superb match. In fact, it's probably the best Carling Black Label in the group. But our customers started sending it back. The people we were sending the beer to in the trade, they didn't like it anymore. So the importance of this is to say, what people want and what the brewer thinks is right, and not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, that's why we've never gone away from the green bottles.
I don't want to get onto the subject of green bottles. I could never understand anybody who wants to lick the rear end of a skunk, but that's another story. But when you talk about flavor stability, you quickly, if you're not careful, go into the realms of philosophy about what is right and what is wrong. And I've been to many places in the world where the beer is inherently stale, and that's the way they like it. And what you got to do is make sure you always deliver it in the same form. That's the argument that we're going a long way from the brew house now, for which I apologize. But the argument is, what you give the customer is what the customer wants, and the customer wants cardboard flavored beer. Then, for goodness sake, make sure they get it every time. The worst sin in the world is to have the same product. One batch of it is fresh, one stale. Who knows what they're supposed to taste like? You mentioned the beer in green glass bottles. A number of times people have said to me, "What the hell is it supposed to taste like?" And that's a terrible thing. We should always know what the product is supposed to taste like, and try to achieve that degree of consistency. So back to the brew house, we actually did, experientially found we could clean up the fresh flavor by cutting down the amount of oxidation that was taking place. And one of the things we did there was actually not attend to oxidation, we also attended to the vigor of the boil. A really vigorous boil, there's this balance between heat stress, but also of purging of volatiles, purging of some of these oxidized components. So, the other argument is that you can have oxidation in the mash, but if you have, one argument is, well, the more you promote it, that could be a good thing, because if you can get rid of the oxidized products by perhaps boiling them off to volatilizing them,
like in the hot break, or
well, you're actually getting one of the purposes of the kettle boil, the copper boil, is volatilization. So if you're producing volatile materials, and then by a vigorous boil, you can purge some of them off. The counter argument is the more you heat, then the greater is the risk of thermal damage and the development of some heat stress, which is not going to necessarily be good for flavor as well. We, again, if I can go back to Bass, if you don't mind me giving you a couple of anecdotes, we actually did quite a lot of work on trying to cut down oxidation in the brew house. In our pilot brewery, when I was a research manager in Burton-on-Trent, we tried all sorts of things, and none of it was desperately exciting. We put things like ascorbic acid, vitamin C into the mash, didn't have the blindest bit of effect. We also put SO2, metabisulfite. I don't know what you guys call it.
These Camden tablets or sodium.
Yeah, we put those in. Because SO2, that's one of the potential generic solutions. SO2 binds to carbonyl compounds, and it sticks onto them and basically makes them non-flavorful. So if the brewing industry in this country was prepared to use SO2 in the finished product, then that's one of the generic solutions, because all these carbonyl compounds would bind on. Of course, there's a temperamental reluctance to do that, because if you have more than 10 parts per million or 10 milligrams per liter of SO2 in the beer, you've got to declare it, It's okay if you're just for beer at home, but if you're going to market it, then you've got to put on the label, contains sulfites, It's okay. It's all very well for the world of wine, but, brewers don't want to do that. Let the wine guys have that sort of dirty labeling. Anyway, we actually... what happens if you cut down the amount of oxidation and bind some of these things upstream? Well, that'd be a good thing. So we put SO2 in, and we got some interesting results. One of the brewers, unbeknown to anybody, took it upon himself to do that experiment himself in the brewery, in a commercial brewery, and he got the beer that tasted like rotten eggs. And what had happened was this SO2 upstream had been taken by the yeast and converted into hydrogen sulfide.
Oh, yeah.
And his beer tasted of rotten eggs. And the reason was that in our pilot brewery, we had a little bit of copper pipe. And copper, of course, is a two-edged sword. On the one hand, it sort of leaks out and it oxidizes and activates the oxygen and causes a problem. But also the copper will bind onto the sulfide and stop the eggy flavor. In his brewery, beautiful gleaming stainless steel brewery, he didn't have any copper, and therefore he got rotten eggs. They didn't sack him. They turned him into a quality control manager instead.
To promote him, yes, of course.
Make him pay for his crime. So where was I going with all that? Well, the answer is, we tried all sorts in the brew house, and sometimes you get interesting results which suggest there's an impact, and just as often as not, you don't get an impact. And you see, because there's a lot of things that happen downstream of the brew house, and probably the most important thing that happens is you put some yeast in, and that's a hell of a good way to clean up stale flavors.
I see. And does it follow that if the fermentation is sluggish or poor, then that job would not be done as well?
Yeah. Yeast, well, I've already mentioned one reaction it does very well, which is convert acetaldehyde into alcohol. Right. That's an example of taking a carbonyl compound and converting it into a higher alcohol, or into an alcohol. And the alcohols have got a much higher flavor thresholds than the aldehyde. So it can also take other aldehydes as well. It can take nonenal and reduce that to an alcohol. And it can take all these carbonyl compounds, if you give it a chance, and take them out of harm's way. You can take stale beer and you can flow it through an immobilized column of yeast, and the yeast will clean it up. Yeast is a great cleanser. It's terrific at doing it. So another argument is, well, who gives a rat's ass about how much oxidation you got in the brew house, because the yeast is going to clean it up anyway.
I see.
There's a well-known brewing company, which I won't name, but has a process whereby they bubble air through hot wort. It's in the stripping process. And they do it, and they do it to actually purge off things like dimethyl sulfide, DMS, because they're looking for this gently flavored product, and they want to purge off this volatile. Now, if you read all the scientific literature on oxidation and hot side aeration and all these things, that of itself, bubbling air through boiling wort, a hot, very, very hot wort, is, it's counterintuitive. And the fact is that company and that beer is probably the freshest beer in the world. And it's unforgiving as well, because if you've got a really dark, heavy, robust stout, you can hide some defects in it, but you can't hide a defect in a gently, subtly flavored North American lager. And yet there they are, bubbling this air through. And of course, what happens is two things. One is I believe that any oxidation that's taking place, they're purging off these carbonyls, they're bubbling them away as well, almost
as they form,
produce them. Yeah. But the second thing is then they put yeast in, and good, healthy yeast that is vigorously able to ferment and to produce the alcohol, and also to to reduce some of these carbonyl compounds. So that is the reason I'm fully convinced that is the reason why it's not a detrimental thing to have excessive aeration upstream when it comes to flavor instability. And that's why I'm always very critical, not critical, but dubious and curious when I read papers where they are arguing that upstream oxidation is the cause of staleness downstream. I need to be convinced.
Okay, that's very interesting. It occurred to me as you were describing the stripping process. Would the temperature of the wort that they're doing that at, I mean, if it's near boiling and when they're sending the air through, would that be different, say, than bubbling air through the wort or agitating the mash when it's only at around 120 to 140 degrees? Or would it be a small difference? Chemically.
Well, the argument that those people who propose the importance of lipoxygenase, they would say that at 120 Fahrenheit, 50 Celsius or whatever, then you're still going to have enzymic action now, and you're going to produce, you're going to take these unsaturated fatty acids and produce them into hydroperoxide. And the argument goes that these things carry through into the downstream, and they will break down in the finished product. That's how they would argue that. I'm dubious about that. I really am dubious. There's another argument that some people put forward, and that is that yes, you do produce these carbonyl compounds in the mash. But they are not reduced by the yeast. They're not taken away by the yeast for this reason. It's because they stick on to other things. And one of there's a woman in Belgium, in Leuven, and she advocates the fact that she says these materials stick onto proteins. Some people think it's SO2 that is actually present in the sulfur dioxide is present in the mash, which binds onto these things, carries it through the fermenter. The yeast doesn't touch it then, and then it gets into the finished beer, and then slowly these complexes break down in the finished product to release the stale compound. That's another argument that some people have to play and put into the equation. All of these things are interesting, but again, it comes back to this the complexity of the fact that wort is a soup full of all sorts of stuff, all sorts of changes taking place, all sorts of interactions. So, there's you could argue using paper chemistry that all of these things are important. At the end of the day, I think the acid test is what is generic that actually you can do to slow down these reactions in the finished product, and that is where I always start. I was talking a few years ago to an MBA meeting in Milwaukee, and talking about I stood up and talked about improving flavor stability, and I think they were all expecting me to come out with some fancy new theory and some magic bullet which was going to solve the problem. And what I said was, three things you need to do. One is think about SO2, but I know you won't. in the finished product. But the other two things are oxygen level as low as possible and keep the finished beer as cold as possible. And they were really disappointed with that. They thought there was something smart I was going to say about upstream and so on.
Yeah.
And they said, well, what do you say to people who invested all this money in new brew houses that cut down the amount of oxygen? And brew house manufacturers are going out of their way to find ways of minimizing oxygen uptake in the brew house. And I said, well, in my opinion, until such time as you've bought the latest in packaging equipment, and you've got packaging systems that will allow the lowest possible oxygen level, then you're just wasting your money. And quite honestly, if you're a commercial brewer and you're shipping your beer around, if you don't have control over the temperature of the beer in the finished bottle, you just it's a joke, because the damage is going to be done in the finished product if it goes to too high a temperature, irrespective of what you've done in the brew house.
Okay.
So you've got to start at the back end of the downstream, and then once we've done everything you can possibly do downstream, now is the time to start tweaking and working back. But I wouldn't invest my next year's salary in, say, hot side aeration is critical. I know that keeping the beer as cold as possible is advantageous, terribly advantageous. And probably that and the oxygen level in the finished product, the two biggest factors, overwhelmingly so, in terms of controlling flavor stability.
So everything else is kind of a molehill compared to temperature and packaging.
Well, yeah. I remember once, I'm telling you another little anecdote now. I never send my PowerPoint presentations in advance of meetings ever since I went off to a meeting. I was going to Denver, and they asked me to send my PowerPoint presentation in advance. And I have a slide which shows a guy called Arrhenius, who's a famous chemist from years ago, who looked at the relationship of heat to chemical reactions. And I was looking at the audience and I said, well, this slide shows my hero, and everybody burst out laughing, and somebody had swapped the picture of Arrhenius for Bart Simpson, which is why I never do that. But anyway, Arrhenius is my hero. And what Arrhenius showed was that every 10 degrees Celsius rise in temperature, then a chemical reaction will go 2 to 3 times faster. Okay, so let's say that you've got a beer which is at room temperature. I know everybody over here thinks about Fahrenheit, but I'm still in Celsius mode. So it's 20 degrees Celsius. Okay, so you're at 70 Fahrenheit. Okay, and let's say that it lasts about 3 months. Then, if you raise the temperature to 30 degrees Celsius, so you raise it to 86 Fahrenheit, then it'll stale between 2 and 3 times faster. Okay.
1 month. Yeah.
So now you're down to a month. And then if you go to 40 degrees Celsius, then you go 2 to 3, which is 104 Fahrenheit. You go to 2 to 3 times faster again. So now you're down, in a week and a bit, Now, Davis, in the middle of summer, in my garage, you can easily reach 37, 40 degrees Celsius, So the beer in there is lasting about a week, And if I went to 60 degrees Celsius, I'm 1 day.
Wow.
And that's what we do in the laboratory to force the situation, to speed up reactions and look at staling. For years, people have used either 30 degrees Celsius for a month or 60 for 1 day, which fits in perfect with Arrhenius. Now, by the same token, if you go from 20 degrees Celsius down to 10, so you go to 50 Fahrenheit, then the thing is 2 to 3 times slower. So instead of 3 months, you're now up to, 9 months.
Wow.
And if you go down to 0, Celsius, or you go down to, almost what's in your refrigerator, a little bit, then you're down at, then you're way over a year. Now that's, on the scale of things, that is so much more dramatic than fiddling around with little bits of hot side aeration. It's order of magnitude different. Of course, the big guys will tell you it costs a lot of money to ship beer around cold. But the magnitude of the effect is out of all proportion with anything that you're going to achieve in the brew house.
Okay, so the take home I'm getting here is that we as brewers can, look at the upstream process. We can look at our mash, and the agitation, and we can look at our siphoning and wort transfer. But if we relax and not get all wrapped up about those steps, but make sure to pitch a very healthy pitch of yeast to the beer, have a good strong fermentation, the yeast will take care of most everything that we did upstream. And then we from there concentrate on good packaging practice, capping on foam, reducing oxygen in the bottle, or keg it and keep it in the refrigerator and keep it cool. Then we've really we're ahead of the game in terms of our time investment into the beer.
I would say so. People say, well, do you sort of disregard totally all this business about cutting out oxidation? And my reply to that is, it probably is no harm to do the sensible things. If you're, a commercial brewery, got a fairly big mash tun, rather than splash the stuff in from the top, gentle fill from the bottom, the logical, common sense things, cutting down the amount of oxidation from the perspective of other aspects like color development and so on and so forth. It's common sense. If it doesn't, but making huge investments. I've heard people talking about having anaerobic brew houses, whether they got brewers going in there with oxygen tanks on the back. I don't know what the hell they would have, but I mean, it seems faintly ridiculous, But so I think it makes sense to do the sensible things, but I wouldn't invest in special malt varieties that have got lacking this enzyme and all this crap. It's just silly. So I think consistent good practice, but in terms of purging the grist and de-aerating the water and all that stuff, that is low priority.
Yeah, it's kind of like just as people staying healthy, avoiding getting sick, doing basic common sense things like washing your hands and not leaning into people that are sneezing. And then just don't worry about it from there. I mean, if you're going to get sick, it's going to happen. Yeah. But I mentioned earlier on that the lighter the flavor of the beer, the bigger a problem becomes. So if you've got a fairly robust ale, and people say, well, ales have got better flavor stability than lagers, and that's because they got all these Maillard reaction products which are mopping up the oxygen radicals and so on. And I say, no, it's probably because they've actually got more flavor, and you're hiding the deterioration to a greater extent. So it depends on the beer. In terms of its basic flavor pattern, its portfolio of flavors in there, and basically the more complex the flavor you've got, then the greater the likelihood that you're going to mask development of staying for a longer period of time. Yeah, they'll have a higher threshold compared to the overall flavor of the beer. I see.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Hey, Charlie, if I could jump in with a question just as the amateur in the room, and John, maybe you could help me too.
Sure.
I guess I don't understand what the difference is between me aerating my wort with pure oxygen just before I pitch yeast or just after I pitch yeast, because I know that that's what my yeast wants, and aerating the wort upstream. I mean, I've understood your explanation, and certainly, John, your great summary at the end that if we pitch a healthy yeast, it's going to eat the oxygen we produce upstream anyway that we put in there. But do you see what I'm saying? Why isn't it all cleansed anyhow? I don't you see what I mean? I mean, I'm deliberately putting oxygen in when I ferment.
Yeah, you're putting the oxygen into immediate before the yeast, for the simple reason that the yeast needs it, and what the yeast is going to do straight away is scavenging it and convert it into its membrane materials, its sterols particularly, and its own unsaturated fatty acids. And it's ironic that, yeast needs to use oxygen to make unsaturated fatty acids, and if you've got unsaturated fatty acids in wort, they are prone to oxidation, so it's an irony there. If the oxygen is put in too soon, then I'm not saying it's nothing's going to happen to it. It is going to react with things. It's going to react with the gel proteins, and it's going to react with other things as well. Whether that's going to impact on flavor stability is debatable, but that oxygen upstream is not going to be available for the yeast to use to make its membrane. So you do need to provide that oxygen to the yeast, before, so it's available to it to really kick off its fermentation. One of the other things we did at Bass was actually to do experiments with directly oxygenating the yeast. So instead of putting the oxygen in the wort, we say, well, what's the oxygen needed for? It's not needed to go into the wort, but it's needed by the yeast. Let's give it to the yeast directly. And there are a number of people still looking at that today, pre-oxygenating the yeast. Some people are actually talking about, well, not even using oxygen. Why not give lipids and so on directly to the yeast and use those directly? So I'm not sure that answers your question. The oxygen is proactively essential for the yeast to actually make its membranes. And if you want good, vigorous fermentation, you've got to make sure that you provide the yeast with the amount of oxygen it needs.
So it's that when it happens upstream, by the time I get to ferment, it's in a different form. By you saying it's unavailable to the yeast, then that does make sense to me. Okay.
Correct. So the oxygen, if you put in the oxygen earlier on, it is going to react with stuff.
Yeah, okay.
The moot point, the debate is, well, if it reacts with some of these things, is it going to cause a problem later on? And my answer is, well, there's no evidence for that, but sure as heck, it isn't going to be available for the yeast. So you need to give the oxygen to the yeast as close as possible to when the yeast needs it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's interesting. It raises a question I've had regarding oxygenation of wort. A lot of us homebrewers use just pure air. We hook up an aquarium pump and a little air stone and drop it in the fermenter and bubble, ordinary room air or filtered room air, I should say, to the wort. And other people hook up an oxygen cylinder and bubble pure oxygen in. And in your opinion, is there any difference chemically? I mean, is pure oxygen going into the wort more likely to oxidize, wort compounds than just plain air, or probably not?
Well, I mean, basically, you have got you're putting in a higher concentration. I'm not convinced it would be a greater problem for the oxidation of the wort, but what
not a significant effect. Yeah.
No, but it depends on the yeast. How much the yeast needs. I mean, some yeasts need higher charges of oxygen than others, and that's one of the great. Perhaps not great, but one of the remaining things that nobody has explained is why different yeast strains need different amounts of oxygen. Some yeast, they're quite happy with not even air saturation, whereas others are not happy with oxygen saturation. Not many of those around, but some need oxygen saturation and some need air saturation and some need not even air saturation, and nobody knows why. Many brewers, certainly smaller brewers, would err on the side of caution, and they would put over higher levels of oxygen in there than they need, simply to avoid any sticking fermentations or to, The downside to that is that the more oxygen you give to the yeast, if you give it too much, then you'll actually get more yeast. Now, it probably doesn't matter on a very small scale, but on a huge brewing scale, averaged over a year, if you produce too much yeast, you produce less beer. And the carbon's got to go somewhere. Your sugar's got to go somewhere. They either go to yeast growth or they go into alcohol. And the more yeast growth you get, the less alcohol. It doesn't really matter if you brew, once a month, but if you're brewing round the clock on very, very big scales, then it makes sense to get exactly the right amount of oxygen, not too little and not too much, just the right amount for the yeast. But as regards the difference between bubbling with oxygen or bubbling with air on flavor stability, not important, in my opinion.
Okay, good to know.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's all about opinion at the end of the day as well.
Yeah.
I can think of one or two people as a chemist in Holland who, he and I often rut in public over the relative importance of lead oxygenase, it's in a reasonably amicable way, but I know that it's what happens downstream that really matters. And we haven't even mentioned the fact that oxygen can creep in between the neck of the bottle and the cork as well. Air can creep in there as well. So people poo-poo beer in cans, but it's actually more stable than beer in bottles.
That's right.
What about so Sierra Nevada is said to, it's my station, I'm allowed to give plugs for actual breweries. They're said to have just switched their bottle cap to this new, an improved bottle cap. You have any opinion about that?
Yeah, well, as far as I know, and Ken, who's a dear friend of mine, he's very passionate about flavor stability. To the best of my knowledge, what Ken's done is to go back from screw-off, twist-off lids, crown corks to pry-off.
The pry-off.
That basically, and that's the reason he's done it. He is convinced, and Ken is, when he's convinced about something, he's using on pretty good evidence. He's convinced that going back is good for the flavor life of Sierra Nevada, and so be it. And that is the reason why it's. You would intuitively you would realize, you would know that oxygen is going to get in, or air is going to get in more easily through a less rigorously screwed-on lid.
Yeah.
And so that's what he's done, and he will have done it because he knows it to be right.
So, and John, you had to see this question coming. For pro brewers, then. Are you an advocate as aluminum cans as a superior package, in terms of oxygen?
As long as the can is properly, the internal surface is properly coated and lacquered and so on, then in terms of flavor stability, then a can is superior to a bottle.
Yeah.
I'm like anybody else. I remember I was in a restaurant in Sydney, I think it was, Australia, and the Chinese restaurant, he bought me beer in a can, and I thought it just looked awful, so it just psychologically was all wrong, even though I knew damn well it was, it was perfectly going to be okay, but but stability-wise, oxygen-wise, then all things being equal, then the beer in the can is going to have the longer shelf life.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I can see one thing I need to do is convince my wife that I need an additional beer fridge. It's
absolutely right.
Yeah,
and also to allow you to go, when you go buy beer, to do it frequently in relatively small quantities, but often.
That's another good way of looking at it. Yeah.
As long as the supermarket's looking after the beer for you, and keeping it cold and rotating it, the logistics, turning it over. I go to a restaurant in David, and. I look at the born on date, the beer I bought, and it's out of date, and what they're doing is, the beer comes out the front and the stuff at the back just stays there, and they just take out, and they put the next batch in front of it, and they don't turn it around, and the rotation of the stock and all these things are so very important. All these logistics that's where you've got to start with the flavor stability, and if you haven't got all that sorted out, then the rest is, you might just forget the rest, you just got to sort all that out.
Wow. Well, this has been a very enlightening hour.
Okay.
I'm as an engineer, I like looking at the details, and I guess I'm in my book and writings and so on. I've been preaching, caution upstream and limiting oxygen. I guess on the other hand, it's nice to know that we can take steps downstream to mitigate the steps upstream.
Yeah.
And so this has been very, very enlightening for me.
Very good. Pleased to be of service.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pleasure. Yeah.
All right.
Well, Charlie, hopefully we can get you on the program again sometime and talk on another topic. I'm sure you're good for several.
Well, we'll do our best. Yeah.
All right.
Get me on the subject of telling people why beer is better than wine. That's what you want.
Yes. In fact, another topic that I recently saw, which I was delighted in, was the glycemic index of beer.
The myth of the beer belly and the stupidity of the South Beach diet. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
That one sounds good to me, too. I want to do a show with you about that, Charlie.
All right, that'd be great.
I get questions all the time about, should we drink light beer on another show that we do, and I just say, you should have a handful of chips less on your night of drinking, and it's and then you can actually enjoy the beer you're drinking.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. All right. Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Charlie. Hey, John, good call on Charlie as a guest, too, right? I'd love to have you back anytime on any topic, Charlie.
All right, that'd be great. Give me a call sometime.
All right.
Will do.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, then.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
What's good for the earth, good for your body, and great for your brew? Organic ingredients. This holiday season, the organic ingredient experts, Seven Bridges Co-op in awesome Santa Cruz, California, offers you the gift that keeps on giving to our planet. Sustainable, fair-wage ingredients to make the best organic homebrew you've ever had. There's a growing demand for organic products, and your choice to brew with them supports organic farmers worldwide. Brew organic, and you'll brew excellent beer that is free from chemical residues and genetically modified organisms, and you'll help contribute to a better world. If you're looking for organic ingredients, Seven Bridges offers a huge selection of USDA-certified kits and raw ingredients, from 8 ounces to 50-pound sacks of grain, whole and pellet hops, and all the equipment you need. Seven Bridges, the organic homebrew experts since 1997. Visit www.breworganic.com.
Did you know that every day a brewcaster goes to bed hungry? Did you know that brewcaster is silently calling for the help of people just like you? Do you know that every day the unicorn and the rainbow have to blow sailors for loose change? For less than the cost of a half-calf, quad-shot, venti, extra-hot soy milk, triple-pump, hazel, low-fat foam, double-cupped macchiato a day, you can help starving adults in Pacheco. Your love can be felt for as little as 7 cents a day. Visit thebrewingnetwork.com/donate to sign up today for as little as $2 a month. Private first class in the BN Army. Buy your way up the ranks as corporal, sergeant, ranger, or colonel with an easy-to-do monthly donation that keeps brewcasters alive and your favorite internet radio station broadcasting. No donation is too small to help those in need. Can't you find it in your heart to share your love with a brewcaster? In return, you will enjoy the wealth of knowledge that comes with every episode of the session, The Jamil Show, and yes, even that other show. Thank you for listening, and please sign up for your donation at thebrewingnetwork.com/donate today.
You're listening to the Brewing Network.
Back to your hosts, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. Putting the testicles in technical. This is Brew Strong.
So, John, I thought that was an excellent interview with
Thank
Mr.
you.
Bamforth.
I really like that one. I learned so much during that interview. Things that I had questions on, or you wonder in your mind how to rank them. Is this more important than that, and so on. To get top not, I mean, state-of-the-art information from a guy
you know
like
what the
that.
guy's talking about.
Yeah.
This isn't just internet rumor that he's,
right, yeah.
Regurgitating. This is based on scientific knowledge.
Yeah.
Of
He
the process.
writes so many articles for the journals, and it's just a world authority on brewing. When you read one of his peer-reviewed articles where he's summarizing everything that's known about beer pH, or summarizing haze or foam, and you've got the best word on it, and so it was really great for me to be able to sit down with him.
Great guy too.
He is
real friendly and nice. He's going to be at the Homebrew Conference in Oakland.
That'll be great.
June 2009. If you haven't signed up for that yet, you want to be a AHA member, of course.
Yep.
You can join the AHA through the Brewing Network, as a matter of fact, and the Brewing Network gets a couple of bucks off of that, and you end up being get Zymergy magazine, which you and I both write for every once in a while, and also
subscribe to.
You get that. You get a big discount on the conference.
Mm-hmm.
And
we've talked about the HA conference, time to time in the past. But for any new members, new listeners out there, that is just one of the best times you can have as a brewer, to go and hang out with other brewers, and you get to listen to people like Dr. Charlie Bamforth and learn so much. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's going to be a great one coming up.
Yeah.
All right. So, Justin, do we have any questions from the chat room on this subject?
We don't. They were just listening intently to Dr. Bamforth.
We blew their minds.
Yeah, I think he really covered everything, didn't he? So, no, not a question to be had.
Wow.
And you don't
That's
have any questions either,
Jamil.
Jamil.
Freaking happened.
I mean, I thought still that you'd come back and have more things to say, but he is really a well-rounded lecture. So,
yeah.
Well, just to kind of summarize everything.
Yeah, give us a recap of. All right, so and that's the thing. What should we do? Practically as brewers, what should we do as far as our process goes? How much should we worry? What's our direct take from this?
Well, the thing I came away with is that, and I kind of mentioned this in the interview, is that when it comes to oxidation and staling, a good comparison is getting sick, catching a cold. I mean, the fermentation of the beer, a good strong fermentation, is equivalent to like our immune system, and it's going to cover 95-99% of everything we're exposed to. Upstream processes like aerating the mash, aerating the wort transfer, and so on. That amounts to like basic common sense, like washing your hands and good sanitary practices, in your day-to-day life, prevent getting sick. But your immune system is going to take care of most of that for you. And when it comes to oxidation, hot side aeration, and beer staling, the fermentation is going to take care of that for you. It's going to clean up a lot of that oxidation that's happened upstream. So really, what you've got to be concerned about is practice, good common sense control upstream. Let's not load, overload the boat. But when what you really need to be concerned about is stuff downstream of fermentation. Controlling aeration in the package after fermentation, and then keeping that fermented beer, that beer, keep it cool so that it doesn't age from heat. And that's the same as when you're trying, you got somebody at the office that's come in sick to work and they're coughing all over everything. And
I think your analogy is just confusing.
Oh, sorry. Well,
I'm sorry. I'm trying to follow along here with the health thing, and I'm thinking, okay, yeast infection, STDs. Maybe that's just the way my mind works.
Your office, perhaps, but
yeah, my office. Yeah.
No, but I mean, there's what it comes down to is that anything that happens upstream of fermentation is molehills or small potatoes. You practice common sense upstream of the fermentation. Let's not be foolish. But if you have a good, healthy fermentation, it's going to clean up most of what happened upstream.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes to packaging your beer,
well, then that's oxidation.
That's oxidation. You want to minimize
Different
oxygen.
show.
You want to minimize oxygen in the package, and you want to keep that beer cold or cool. If it sits in a hot garage, it's going to oxidize faster. These staling reactions are going to occur. You can't prevent it.
Right.
And go back to my sick model. You are going to get sick at some point. You
are going to catch an STD at some point.
Yes.
At least some crabs or something.
Yeah, at least in this crowd. So, if you practice good, common sense upstream hygiene and sanitation,
use a condom.
Have a good, strong, healthy immune system, or a good, strong, healthy fermentation. Then you really only need to worry about downstream packaging issues, oxidation, hot temperatures that will definitely stale your beer. Or, once you've thrown the immune system out of the equation, if you just, sleep around like certain people might, then yes, you probably catch something.
Jay-Z, you should be loving this description because it goes to your lazy man philosophy. What Dr. Bamforth has said is go ahead and be sensible about the beginning.
Right.
Like you just said, Palmer, take all the necessary precautions, but don't worry about it. Worry about the after the fact, because that's where you're going to run into trouble. The packaging, the bottling, you don't take care of it there. That's what you should be paying attention to. So it really goes with your whole less is more. JC.
Absolutely. All right. So I get two things to bring up. One is, all right, now, John, do I interrupt you to a point where you don't cover the information that you're going to cover?
No, I don't think so.
And do I help you actually fill out the information that you're going to present? I ask questions that will help you. Right?
That is true.
All right. So you people who think I'm interrupting John with stupid ass stuff, yes, I am. But it does not prevent the information from coming out. Okay, it's entertainment for entertainment's sake.
In the end, nothing's going to keep Palmer from coming out.
Exactly.
I was going to state that differently, but we'll go with that one. Okay.
We'll go with that.
That's right. I did have
one more, and then we'll get to the question from the chat. The late question from the chat.
It's probably Bub.
All right. So it seems to me that the thing is, hot side aeration does exist.
Yes.
Right. You can oxidize various compounds in the mash, in the wort, and they could have a negative impact on the beer, cause staling.
That is a fact. Yes.
But the thing is, so you want to, as a brewer, you want to, you don't want to be totally freaked out about it.
Right.
But it's okay to stir your mash. It's okay to do various things. Don't go nuts. Just regular stirring, gentle stirring's probably overly cautious. Normal, how you maybe stir a mash would be fine, or how you dough in.
Right.
But if you're, some automated tool that's like thrashing the thing would be too much.
That's right. Wash your hands, but don't go overboard. Don't sanitize everything.
You don't need to burn your skin layer off with acid, right?
You don't need to carry hand sanitizer with you everywhere and wipe off the keyboards and such.
And all right, so but the only reason this doesn't matter is because you're going to have good fermentation practice. Now, you have crappy fermentation practices. If you're not pitching the right amount of clean, healthy yeast, MrMalty.com.
That's right.
You are going to run into trouble. So what you want is a good, healthy fermentation, quality yeast products from the fine yeast companies out there.
Right.
And using, you're not going to use some minimal amount of bread yeast or something. You want to use good products. Right pitching rates, proper fermentation temperatures, things like that.
Aeration, temperature, all the good things we preach.
Right. All that stuff. You're going to get good, healthy fermentation. You're going to resolve any of that hot side aeration, which it does exist, but it's not an issue in the beer because of decent fermentation. The fermentation, the yeast clean that stuff up. You really don't have a problem. So don't go overboard. make sure you have good fermentation, and you're fine. So hot side aeration really should not be an issue for anybody as far as staling or flavor stability. Really not a big deal.
That's right. It is something to be aware of, but it is not something that's going to control your life.
Great. Like STDs. All right, so Justin, the question from the chat.
Yeah, I'm not sure you guys are going to be able to handle this one, actually.
We can handle a big one.
All right, the question is, why did brewers around 1900 encourage hot side aeration for darkening and use 2-hour boils with a 15% evaporation rate as a matter of course? What feature were they seeking?
Is this a multiple choice?
Melanoidins?
That's what I thought. Yeah, and that's kind of what the listeners were thinking, too.
Because melanoidin formation requires oxygen to some extent, doesn't it?
Yeah. It goes back, I think, part of the answer may be the Budweiser practice, which this was the company that Charlie didn't want to name, but they do stripping, where they bubble air through hot wort, boiling hot wort, to help strip DMS precursors and other volatiles from the wort, which improves beer flavor stability downstream. You're thinking, all that oxidation, they're definitely darkening the wort. They're definitely adding, or aiding melanoidin formation and darkening the wort. But a good, strong, healthy fermentation cleans up the oxidative damage that may have occurred and leaves you with a cleaner beer.
It's like penicillin.
Yeah, that's right.
Really can clean up a lot of things, fellas.
So eat moldy peanut butter sandwiches.
When you got the drip, yeah.
Go ahead and eat that moldy bread.
When you're peeing brown, black, or bloody.
Yeah. All right, everything else are just shill questions coming from the chat now, so I think they've lost interest.
Wow. All right. Okay, so I think that's the show.
I think it was a great show.
Excellent.
Like I said,
you did a spectacular job with Dr. Bamforth.
Thank you.
And our thanks to Charlie Bamforth for being on the show and really helping us out understand,
If you get a chance, come to the HA conference this summer.
Yeah.
He's going to be there. A lot of their notable brewers are going to be there. Dr. Michael Lewis is a possibility.
Clayton Cone,
real yeast expert. It's going to be just a phenomenal conference this summer.
Great beers, great food, great people. One of the best things. If you get a chance, go to the Brewing Network store. Take a look. We got signed copies of Brewing Classic Styles, How to Brew. We got Brew Strong shirts. There's the Hop Grenade shirts and hoodies. Those are really popular. Great stuff. I love mine. I wear it all the time. And, if you get a chance, you can sign up for the AHA. You can sign up for Brew Your Own. John and I both write for that. And the next show coming up is going to be on carbonation. Everything about carbonation. How to get proper levels of carbonation. How to...
what the heck we're talking about when we say volumes
of CO2, things like that. Yeah, it's going to be a good show. I think this, again, was an excellent show, and I think you did a grand job with Dr. Bamforth.
Thank you.
All right. So, thanks for listening, and brew strong.
Brew strong, everybody.